Freddie Mercury was born in Zanzibar on the 5th of September, 1946. He was named Farrokh Bulsara. His family were Parsi adherents of the Zoroastrian faith, the ancient Persian religion that had survived centuries of displacement by keeping its traditions alive in diaspora communities across India and East Africa. He spoke Gujarati and some Urdu before he spoke English. He was educated at a boarding school in Panchgani in Maharashtra, India, from the age of 8, learning the colonial curriculum in English while living in a culture that was neither his family's Parsi tradition nor the Indian culture surrounding it. He moved to England in 1964 at the age of 17, following his family who had fled Zanzibar during the revolution. He studied at Ealing Art College in London. He worked at a market stall in Kensington selling second-hand clothes. He formed a band and changed his name. And in changing his name and choosing Freddie Mercury, a name that was English without being traditionally English, theatrical without being ethnically specific, a name that could belong to anywhere and therefore belonged everywhere, he made the most complete possible use of the specific quality that his life had given him. The quality of being from no single place, in no single tradition, shaped by no single world. Freddie Mercury was the person he was because he had been nowhere that was fully his and everywhere that was partly his. The Between Worlds life made the Between Worlds performer. Zanzibar in 1946 was a British protectorate off the coast of what is now Tanzania, an island of extraordinary cultural density where Arab, African, South Asian, and European traditions had been layering across centuries of trade routes. The Parsi community there was small and established traders who had brought the Zoroastrian faith with them from India. Freddie Mercury's father, Bomi, worked as a cashier for the British colonial government. The household in which Farrokh Bulsara was born was a Parsi household in an Arab city under British administration, a combination of cultural layers that produced a child who was, from the beginning, in the middle of things rather than at the center of any single one. From the start, between worlds. St. Peter's School in Panchgani, Maharashtra, was a British-style boarding school. Farrokh Bulsara arrived at 8, away from his family for the first time, in an environment conducting its education in a language he was still learning, in a country that was not his country. The school gave him English, and with it the cultural fluency that would eventually allow him to inhabit British rock as if it were his own. It also gave him something else. The experience of being a stranger in a room, of learning to make yourself at home in a context that is not naturally yours. He learned music at St. Peter's. He learned to perform. He learned to be in a room full of people who were not him, the person who commanded the room anyway. Born in Zanzibar, educated in India. Arrived in England at 17. In every place he had ever lived, he had been from somewhere else. In every culture he had ever inhabited, he had been partly inside and partly outside. And when he became Freddie Mercury, when he stood on stages in London and Tokyo and Buenos Aires and conducted crowds of hundreds of thousands, the specific quality of someone who had never fully belonged anywhere made him belong everywhere. The Between Worlds life was not a disadvantage he overcame. It was the specific training for the thing he became. The English language was not Freddie Mercury's first language. Gujarati was the language of the family. Urdu had a presence in both Zanzibar and India. The colonial school added English. French came later. And English spoken with the formal precision of someone who had learned it as a foreign language, not the casual native speaker English of the British rock scene, became the medium of everything he created. The specific quality of his lyrical sensibility, the theatrical grandiosity, the operatic scale, the willingness to use language in ways native speakers sometimes find excessive, is partly the quality of someone for whom the language must be earned rather than simply inhabited. Freddie Mercury earned English, and what he made with it was not ordinary. Freddie Mercury almost never discussed the Parsi tradition in public. It was not part of the persona he constructed, the theatrical British rock star, the flamboyant frontman, the person who had remade himself completely from Farrokh Bulsara into Freddie Mercury. But the Parsi tradition was not absent from who he was. It was present in the specific quality of his family life, the close bonds with Jer and Bohemian Bulsara that he maintained across his entire career, the Zoroastrian funeral that was the ceremony of his death, the specific values of the Parsi community: privacy, family loyalty, the expression of love through presence rather than through public disclosure that are visible in the way he lived his private life. The tension between the public, Freddie Mercury, flamboyant, theatrical, completely visible, and the private Freddie Mercury, loyal, protected, deeply family-oriented, is at least partly the tension between the persona he constructed and the tradition he came from. He never resolved this tension. He lived inside it. The between worlds quality was not only geographical, it was the tension between what he became and where he had come from, held together by the specific force of his personality. The accounts of people who knew Freddie Mercury across his different cultural contexts describe a quality that is rare but not unknown in genuinely multilingual, multicultural people: the quality of being different in different languages. Not simply more comfortable in one language than another, but actually different in personality, in register, in the specific way of occupying the relationship between speaker and listener. In Gujarati with his family, he was the son and the brother, the specific family register of the Bulsara household, warm and particular and domestic. In English, the language of Queen and the press and the concert stage, he was the performer, the wit, the theatrical intelligence who had made himself from the available materials of British rock in art and fashion. In French spoken in Munich and on tour in France, where he was more comfortable than many of his bandmates, he was something more private, the language associated with the anonymity of a European city and the freedom that anonymity provided. Brian May has described a quality in Freddie Mercury when speaking his family languages that was different from the public persona, a warmth and directness that the English stage persona sometimes managed away. Different languages, different people, one person containing all of them. 4 languages, each one a different version of the same person. The Gujarati son of a Parsi family from Zanzibar. The English rock star who had made himself from nothing. The French speaker in a European city where he could be anonymous. The man who held all of these simultaneously and who, when he walked onto a stage in front of 70,000 people, had all of these available to draw from. The between worlds life gave him more versions of himself than most people have, and he used all of them. Every night. The name change is the most visible sign of the between worlds identity and deserves to be read carefully. Farrokh Bulsara, becoming Freddie Mercury, was not simply a stage name adopted for convenience. It was a specific act of self-construction, the selection of a persona that could contain what the given name could not, in the specific context of the British rock scene of the early 1970s. Farrokh was a Parsi name, specific in its cultural origin, immediately marking its bearer as from somewhere other than the tradition of British rock. Freddie was the kind of English first name that belongs to no particular class or region, comfortable, unspecific, available. Mercury was theatrical and mythological, the messenger of the gods, the planet, the element, and it had the specific quality of a name that suggests both speed and transformation. The combination created a persona that was neither specifically British, nor specifically Parsi, nor specifically anything a name that could belong to the person who performed at Wembley and Buenos Aires and Nebworth without any of those contexts placing a specific prior claim on it. Farrokh Bulsara was from somewhere. Freddie Mercury was from everywhere. The name change was the completion of the between worlds life. If there is a single world that Freddie Mercury fully belonged to, the one context in which the between worlds quality resolved into something complete, it is the stage. Not the specific cultural tradition of the stage, not the British rock tradition or the operatic tradition or any other specific theatrical lineage, but the stage as an abstract space, the space in which a performer and an audience create something together that neither could create alone. This space has no national identity, no ethnic specificity, no cultural tradition that owns it. It belongs to anyone who can use it. And Freddie Mercury could use it with a completeness that exceeded everyone else who used it in his generation, precisely because the between worlds life had given him no fixed position to fall back on, no inherited tradition to occupy, no cultural comfort zone to rest in. He had to earn the stage every night from the beginning because he had no prior claim on it. and the earning the specific quality of someone who occupies a space not by right, but by ability produce the performances that the world remembers. Among the places outside England that Freddie Mercury spoke about most warmly and with the most apparent ease was Japan. Queen's Japanese following enormous, devoted, the specific quality of the intense Japanese rock fandom of the 1970s was a following that Freddie Mercury experienced as one of the most complete forms of musical reception he encountered anywhere. He has spoken about Japan as a place where he felt, paradoxically, most himself, where the distance between his public persona and the cultural context was large enough to create a specific freedom. In Japan, nobody expected him to be from anywhere in particular. The specific cultural complexity of his background, the Zanzibar birth, the Indian education, the Parsi tradition, the British rock career was invisible in Japan in a way it was not invisible in England. He was simply a performer, received on the specific terms of what he could do on stage. The between-worlds man, in a place sufficiently outside all his worlds, found something that felt temporarily like belonging. In Japan, he was not Parsi, or Indian, or British, or immigrant, or rock star, in the specific cultural sense any of those identities carried in their native context. He was Freddie Mercury, the stage version, the complete version, the version that had been made from all the other versions. And in Japan, that version was received without the specific cultural weight that any of the other contexts attached to it. He was between worlds there too, but the space between worlds in Japan felt like the place itself. And he was most at home in the place between worlds. The specific quality of Freddie Mercury's art is at least partly the product of the between worlds life. The operatic ambition in rock music, not a natural feature of the British rock tradition, but the importation of an aesthetic encountered in multiple cultural forms and synthesized into something entirely his own. The theatrical excess, the flamboyance of someone who had been performing identity across multiple cultural contexts since the age of 8 and who understood that identity is always a performance. The ability to address vast crowds in a register that felt intimate. The skill of someone who had spent his life translating between worlds and who applied this to the performer-audience relationship with results that have never been equaled. The between worlds life was not a biographical detail. It was the method. Brian May has spoken across decades of interviews about Queen and about Freddie Mercury with a quality of genuine puzzlement about the specific way in which Freddie Mercury exceeded what anyone around him could fully account for. The talent is acknowledged, the voice, the stage presence, the songwriting ability, but behind the specific acknowledgement is a quality of wonder at the combination. How all of these things existed in the same person and worked together to produce something that was consistently more than the sum of its parts. What Brian May has not said, because it is not the kind of thing that the people closest to a person typically articulate, is that the specific excess of Freddie Mercury, the thing that exceeds what the individual talents account for, may be the between worlds quality itself. The person who has been in every room of their life, slightly from somewhere else, develops a specific kind of intelligence. The intelligence of the translator, the adapter, the person who must always read the room more carefully than the person who grew up in the room because they cannot take the room for granted. Freddie Mercury read every room. He had spent his life doing it. And on stage, the reading of the room was what made the performance what it was. Brian May grew up in Feltham. Roger Taylor grew up in Truro. John Deacon grew up in Leicester. And Freddie Mercury grew up in Zanzibar and Panchgani and Feltham and everywhere between. They were all in the same band, but only one of them had never, anywhere in their life, been entirely at home. And the one who had never been entirely at home was the one for whom the stage, the one place that belongs to no one by inheritance, became the only full belonging he ever had. The between worlds man on the between worlds stage. Everything he was, finally, in one place. Farrokh Bulsara was born in Zanzibar in 1946 and died as Freddie Mercury in Kensington in 1991. In the 45 years between, he lived in 5 countries, spoke 4 languages, inhabited multiple cultural identities simultaneously, and made himself into one of the most recognizable performers in the history of music. He did not do this despite the between worlds life. He did it because of it. The displacement, the constant translation, the experience of being partly inside and partly outside every room he had ever occupied, all of this was not a difficulty that had to be overcome in order to become what he became. It was the specific training for the thing he was. The stage is the one place where between worlds is not a disadvantage but a superpower, where the person who belongs nowhere can belong everywhere, where the person who has been translating all their life can give the translation directly to 100,000 people at once, where the specific intelligence of someone who has never been fully at home finally finds the one home that requires no prior claim. He found it. He stood on it. He said goodnight and sweet dreams. And then he was gone.